Hi, in this and the following videos, we want to explore how different disciplines approach sustainable consumption. Today, it's time for a sociologist's perspective, and we ask, what horizons of sustainable consumption do you open for us, sociologists? And this multifaceted exploration of reality, it's like the story of a blind man and the elephant. Each person perceives only a part of the whole. Similarly, each discipline reveals different aspects of sustainable consumption from its own perspective. They probably describe different parts of the elephant depending on their predispositions and where they were sitting or standing, which is quite logical. However, they were inferring about its wholeness based on what they recognized and learned. And this is where caution will have been useful. Why caution? It's certainly valuable to recognize that the elephant's trunk is tender and soft, but is it true of the elephant as a whole? In a similar way, people from different disciplines look at our elephant sustainable consumption to understand how it can be described and analyzed, and to identify what influences it and what it impacts on. So, as you can see, the key to understanding the sociologist's perspective on consumption and the factors that sociology has identified as shaping it is to understand the glasses he or she puts on to look at reality. First, sociologists are primarily interested in social groups and societies. This focus distinguishes them from psychologists who are primarily concerned with individuals and their behavior and experiences. Although social psychology broadens this horizon. When studying sustainable consumption, sociologists will not ask why we as individuals buy organic products. Instead, they focus on studying whole groups of societies. For example, they might ask what makes highly developed societies or wealthy social groups consume in certain ways. Why do these groups want to stand out from others? For example, by dressing differently, eating differently, or going on holiday differently. And why do we want to fit in with our group? For example, by making sure we have certain gadgets or by adapting the style of a particular group. Sociologists are less interested in individual motives, which are characteristic of psychology or economics, and more interested in the societal processes that lead to such changes, which brings us to the next question. Second, sociologists seek to understand the interactions and processes that maintain and change societies. This distinguishes them from traditional economists who are most interested in the effects of our aggregate individual actions: production, consumption, exchange. Not heterodox economists add many sociological threads to the field of economics. As sociologists studying sustainable consumption may be fascinated by the phenomenon of the consumer society. They will try to understand what it means and to identify the causes of this phenomenon. In their search for causes, however, they focus on factors of sociological interest. That is, they do not concentrate on individual motives, personal values, or even needs, but on aspects such as inequalities, changes in the system of social organization, for example, economic systems, and the availability of new technologies. They explore the characteristics of this society and how it is maintained and regenerated. For example, through constructed identities, media, education. Thirdly, sociology studies the dynamics of the components of societies. These components include institutions, communities, populations, and gender, race, or age groups. As you can see, economics is keen to learn from sociology by adapting its concept of institutions within institutional economics. As sociologists might be interested in differences in consumption patterns between groups or populations, such as those based on age. They will also be interested in the institutions, mainly informal but also formal. Economics reverses these proportions that reinforce certain patterns of consumption, such as traditions, parenting methods, or existing holidays. Yes, in the end we will focus on these institutions, which are also of interest to institutional economists and the role they play in sustainable consumption. What are they? Institutions are enduring patterns of behavior, social norms and values that play a key role in the organization of social life. They are social structures that shape the actions of individuals or the groups in society and provide a framework for their interactions. Let us now look at their functions and how they can influence sustainable and unsustainable consumption. First, institutions regulate the behavior of individuals through norms and rules. Through them, a person knows how to behave in a given situation. These norms and rules are not necessarily considered from the ethical point of view of whether they are good. Therefore, when an unwritten rule or norm becomes getting rich or more is better or faster, we already have an explanation for why we face sustainability problems. To give a more specific example, the norm of having a green lawn in the front of my house, regardless of the climate I live in and how much water it uses. Second, institutions transmit values, beliefs, and knowledge. Education is a prime example of such an institution. It is in kindergarten, school, and further education that we learn how to act and why. In order to achieve sustainability, it's incredibly important that education from the very beginning make us aware of how and why we should behave in a sustainable way. Preferably, this is done by showing the positive impact on our immediate group, our lake, our town, our family. Similarly, when discussing threats, we are much more concerned about those that affect our own group and, unfortunately, much less concerned about those that affect other countries or groups of people with whom we do not identify. How do we acquire norms and values through education? Understanding this is extremely important for teaching sustainability effectively. The norm that applies to a particular group is not necessarily the most desirable norm for society, humanity, or the environment. Therefore, it may not be sufficient to introduce sustainable consumption as a compulsory subject in schools. We are more likely to absorb not the explicit content but the implicit content that we acquire by observing the norms and rules of the group, as mentioned above. If we observe that someone wears different clothes every day, eats out of disposable containers, and that it's an unwritten rule to have certain gadgets, we are more likely to adopt these behaviors than what we learn in class. Therefore, when teaching sustainability, we need to consider how to deal with these unwritten norms and behaviors. Third, different institutions have different functions that respond to different societal needs. For example, the institution of education is responsible for learning and disseminating knowledge. There is also the institution of the family, which responds to the need for care and upbringing, and institutions such as religion and the economy, which respond to spiritual needs and resource management, respectively. Integrating these institutions can facilitate the assimilation of values and attitudes towards sustainability. Reference to religious values can be helpful if they are important to the community. For example, Christianity emphasizes social justice and moderation, while Buddhism promotes principles such as non-harm, mindfulness, and moderation. What principles of sustainability are there in your religion? Fourth, institutions legitimize social power structures by not only reflecting but also perpetuating existing dynamics by regulating access to resources and influence. Researchers observe that existing sustainability strategies can both reflect and reinforce existing divisions. As you may recall from Module 1, in the discussion of the Sustainable Development Goals, the reformist option, representing the interest of wealthy countries, has prevailed. Some scholars question how environmental, social, and governance (SG) criteria might even reinforce divisions between rich and poor countries. Moreover, the market is an institution that often reinforces rather than reduces existing inequalities. The less we own, the weaker our position in the market and the less influence we have to change that status quo. Similarly, neoliberalism, a set of policies adopted in developed countries and often promoted in developing countries, can work against the social and environmental dimensions of sustainable consumption. Numerous studies critical of neoliberalism suggest that it undermines institutions that support economically weaker actors, for example, trade unions. It tends to prioritize efficiency over sufficiency and does not advocate a reduction in consumption, which can be detrimental to environmental sustainability. They also seek to understand how institutions such as education, family, religion, or the market influence sustainable consumption by regulating behavior, transmitting values, and legitimizing power structures. Sociology thus offers different perspectives on sustainable consumption, focusing on social dynamics, interactions, processes, and the role of institutions in shaping how societies and their groups make consumption decisions.